Um, and on the weekends, we'd work all day Saturday and maybe part of Sunday if he had a bunch of rabbits ready to go. Um, I'm not real sure how long we did that, but that was a lot of work, and I think Dad just decided that it was just too much work to try to work and take care of. It was becoming a big deal. I mean, we had, we had rabbits all over that backyard, and hutches 2 and 3 high, and it took a while to take care of them every day. Donnie and I, part of our job, after we get in from school, part of our job was to feed and water the rabbits and help take care of them. But there was a bunch of them. If anybody wanted to call something a rabbit ranch, I think we had enough to qualify for them to be a rabbit ranch. Daddy had the droppings. It got, it was so much of that till Daddy had to haul it off. We couldn't leave it laying around there. We was in the edge of town, and it would get to stinking, so Daddy'd have to haul it off. So. I wanted a horse, and kept talking to Dad, and he finally decided that I could have a horse. He didn't have anything it didn't have anything taking up the backyard, and we had a pretty good sized lot. In fact, Dad had 2 lots, and I believe at that time that was before he sold the other lot. So he didn't have anything else in the backyard at that time, and done got rid of all the rabbits. And so we built a lot and a little shed out there, and there was a place on the north side of Fort Worth that it was actually a glue factory, and they would go out over in the country and gather up horses and bring them in, crippled horses, horses that was just wasn't any good for anything else. When they'd made their last mile, and they would bring them in and kill them and render them and make glue. And so somebody told Dad that every once in a while they get a pretty good horse and they won't kill it. And so we decided to go over there and talk to him. We went over there and talked to this man, and he was kind of a short guy and kind of bow-legged and looked just like an old cowboy. And we talked to him, and he said, yeah, I said, every once in a while I get a pretty fair horse, and said, I hold them off as long as I can and not let them kill them. So Dad gave him his phone number and said, next time you get one, well, give us a call and we'll come down. So he did, and he called and we went down, and it was a young horse, but he was real skinny. He wasn't sick. The guy said he's not sick, he just hadn't been taken care of. And so we took him home. I don't remember now whether I named him or whether he already had a name, but his name was Tom, Old Tom. And he was a real small bone horse. Real chest was real narrow, his hips was real narrow. And we had fed the hound out of him, and we just never could. We got him fleshed out okay. He wasn't poor anymore, but he just wouldn't get big. He just wasn't a big horse. And Well, I never did have a saddle for him. Dad bought the horse, but he didn't buy no saddle. And I had to ride him bareback, and all that hurt. Big old bone and backbone and withers. I would put blankets on him and stuff, and I finally decided I was going to make me a saddle. Well, I ended up making a saddle. It could be classified as a saddle, I guess, but it had a lot to be desired. But it didn't. It was better than bareback. And Dad kidded me then about having a $100 saddle and a $40 horse. But we got rid of Tom and went back and talked to the guy again. And he said, "Okay, I'll watch for you." Well, he wasn't long before he called and said, "I've got you a horse." So we went down. Oh, by the way, we didn't have a trailer and didn't know anybody that did, horse trailer. And so I would ride the horse. This is on the north side of Fort Worth, and I would ride him all the way out to River Oaks, which is probably, I don't know, 15, 20 miles. And so we went down and bought him a little brown, short-coupled horse, but he was fat. He was broad, round, and he was easy to sit on, I'll tell you. I could ride him bareback without any problem. But he was a dandy. I rode him around the neighborhood and around, and about a mile from the house, there was a little community roping pen. And about once or twice a week, everybody'd gather over there, and somebody had some calves, and they brought them in, and they roped at night. Well, I decided I'd just ride over there one evening. That mean I'd have to ride back in the dark, but I figured I could handle it. So I went, we watched. I'd sat on my horse and outside the arena and along the fence and watch them rope. And one of the ropers come by and looking at my horse, and he said, "That's not a bad looking horse." Said, "How long you had him?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, has anybody ever roped off of him?" I said, "I have no idea." And he said, "Well, he just looks like he'd be a good rope horse." Well, boy, that just tickled me, man. I mean, we have a horse that was a good roping horse, and so I had run him and raced him a time or two, and he was always fast. I outrun nearly everything that all the kids around there's horses, and so he said, "Well, would you mind if I tried him?" "Oh, Lord, no." I said, "You bet you. Give him a try." Why, he took him around there and put his saddle on him and went in the arena, and it just looked like a different horse. When he got in that arena, his attitude changed. And the guy backed him in the box and nodded his head, and boy, he come out of that chute like a rocket. And he caught that calf just pretty darn quick. And the guy roped him and stepped off, and he just backed up and held that rope just as tight as he could. And that guy just come out of that arena with him. And he said, "Man, where did this horse come from?" And I said, "Well, the guy that we bought him off of said that he come out of West Texas." And he said he didn't know for sure, but he thought he come off of one of the ranches out in West Texas. And the guy said, well, if he was on a ranch, he was also roped in an arena because he knows what that arena is for. He said, I could tell the difference when I rode in the arena with him. So somebody had been roping with him in an arena, and might have been doing some pasture roping too, but he knew what to do in that arena. Oh man, you couldn't have bought that horse for $1 million then from me. I was so proud of him. I never did rope off with him very much, but I was sure glad that he was a roping horse. There was a girl about my age, lived 4 or 5 blocks, I guess, from the house, and she had a horse, and we rode together some. I don't know where in the world, why they got a goat, but her dad was a doctor, and they lived up on what we call Skyline Drive, and the houses was quite a bit more expensive up in that area. But for some reason or another, they'd bought a goat, and so she and I was riding one day, and I said, reckon your folks would care if we tried to rope that goat? Well, I'll find out. So she asked him, and a few days later she called me, or I saw her or something, and she said, Dad said we could rope that goat if you want to. Oh man. So I didn't even have a saddle, but I went up there, and they had a pen of probably 50 by 60 or 70 feet, and we would run that goat around that pen and try to rope him. And both of us managed to catch it a time or two. We would pile off the horse and run down. Of course, we'd have to go hand over the rope because we didn't have a saddle that the rope was tied to, but we'd go down that rope and throw that goat. I'm not sure we even had a picking string, but we'd throw him. It didn't take very many times till that goat got real hard to catch, man. He would duck the rope. You could throw a rope at him and he'd duck it. He'd see it coming and he'd duck it. So that didn't last too long before he got too smart for us. Skyline Drive followed the top of a hill, and it went on across Jacksboro Highway, which was the main highway out of Fort Worth that went northwest up through Jackson, Azle, Springtown, Jacksboro, on out to West Texas. But Skyline Drive crossed it, and right there where at the intersection up on the hill on the north side of Jacksboro Highway, they built a firecracker plant. And then back east of that, it was a big old hill, and it was all bare country, probably 100 and something acres up on that hill, and scattered up there. And we rode up there a lot. But anyway, that firecracker plant, it had been there a year, 2 years, and that thing blew up one day. Just leveled it, man. I mean, there wasn't nothing left, just kindling and a foundation. And a bunch of houses around it. There was a few people that lived fairly close to it. Man, it just leveled everything within 100 yards, and then damaged a lot of stuff a lot further than that away from it. It probably was not over 100 yards from the highway, and all the vehicles were going along the road at that time. Man, it blew them around and wrecked some of them. there was a man that lived on the other side of that pasture. His name was Mr. Pulliam. And he had some horses. He was a horse shoer. And he had about 30, 35 acres in the bottom. And a creek run through it. He had half a dozen horses. One of them was a great, big albino stallion. Big old thing. Stout looking at, and gosh, the fence that he kept him in was a board fence, and it was stout. It was built out of two cross ties and 2x6s, and double, on both sides. And he had two what they call a strawberry roan horses. They're real kind of speckled and reddish. They were full brothers. And they were just about as goofy as they could be. But Mr. Pulliam would, me and Jimmy Clarity is a guy that I run around with some. We would go over there and he would let us ride them. And wouldn't let us out of the pasture. We just ride them around in his pasture. And they were spooky. They would jump, anything would spook them. And we would